Okay.
That it? Welcome to the May 1st Planning Commission meeting. There are guests and the members. First on the agenda is taking care of approval of the minutes that are in your packet. Anybody have any concerns or with the minutes? Motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So moved, Chad. Liz, you have anything?
I don't.
Jeff?
No, sir.
Tim? Jeff? Bruce? Larry? Moving on?
Yep.
New business, starting the appeals cases. We don't have any cases.
No.
You want to go through the other stuff or do the officers last, or what you want?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
That's fine. Let me just run through this subdivision real quick. We'll get that done. So this is Cathedral Springs. This is on 1,000 acres. We've seen this several times over the last year, so they've been bringing this in one lot at a time. So they're looking to now do lot 7. It's off Crows Point Road, existing road, so pretty simple from my standpoint. No infrastructure or anything there to look at, just coming in one lot at a time. Questions on that one?
Everything in order with this?
Yeah, they're going by that original preliminary plan. They've been, no changes to it, just bringing in one lot at a time for recording.
Is that normal to do one lot at a time, or is it just?
Pre-2008, people were recording big subdivisions
Right.
all at once. Certainly there's a tax burden once you do that. So I think after that, when lot sales were not happening as quickly, people pulled back a little bit. So they're doing a lot more phases or single developments like this after that.
Any comment on this? That motion, second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So moved, Chad.
Okay. Let me ask John to go ahead and do the county districts. This wasn't on the agenda. It's something I added, kind of a minor thing. So these would be county agricultural land preservation districts. They've already been to the Ag Advisory Board, so the Planning Commission would take action on them next, and then forward them on to the county commissioners for final approval, if you're okay with them.
So as we just mentioned, first one here we're looking at is Graydon Crawford's. He's out in Pleasant Valley off of Landon's Dam Road, and he has his property is really honestly mostly self-preserving because just about everywhere he has access to a nearby road is covered either by a blue line stream, which is protected by Maryland Department of the Environment, or he's got wetlands or 30% slope. But I suppose someone could develop it theoretically if they wanted to put a lot of money and effort into it. For the most part, it's just woodland with some pastures and farm fields. He's got a total of 143 acres, 62 of which are qualifying by Maryland Agricultural Preservation Standards. The other one we have is...
I have a question on that one.
Yes.
On that one, you see that, back up to your map here. You see that that line where the two parcels are divided.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a right of way or what is that?
So his house is back in here, and so that is like an exception.
That's the part he's withholding, the 2.6 acres.
Right.
So that part won't be in the.
That's correct.
I think this was created, if I remember correctly, as a flag lot. So you can kind of see the stem going back here to it, and that's a separate lot in the middle, if I'm correct, and all the rest of the lot.
Yeah.
I just thought it ended up in the body of water there, and I wasn't sure how that.
What was the question again?
You could see, I thought it ended up in the body of water, whatever that is right there.
All this green here, this part here,
Okay.
that's qualifying soils.
Okay.
That's what that represents.
Yeah, that's not a pond, that's just a soil layer showing which soil it's in.
We need to do these individually?
You can do it either way.
Okay. Good.
Any other questions on that one, Graydon Crawford? The next one that you're seeing there on your screens is Chester Yoder, which is off of Harmon Road up near Accident. And he has 172 acres, 142 of which are qualifying by Maryland Agricultural Preservation Standards. got generally good soils, and he also has a lot of 30% or more slopes, but he does have access off of Harmon Road, so it is also theoretically developable. But pretty much all farm fields there, pretty straightforward on that one.
This one's in the Bear Creek
It is in
area.
Bear Creek, yes.
So if they get approval for their districts, this will potentially use rural legacy funding for a permanent easement, and then the Crawford one would go through the Maryland Ag Land Preservation Foundation if they decide to apply for those.
Any questions on either of those?
Anybody have anything on this? I got a question. How many acres have been actually put over in this program so far?
7,000 to 8,000 at least, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I don't have it off the top of my head.
About
Through the two programs.
Any further discussion on this? Anybody have any problem with it? Motion?
Make a motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So moved, Chad.
Thanks. So we want to move on and discuss the farm winery a little more.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
thought about it.
So as a bit of a summary, I'm not sure if you were here, Jeff. I think most people have been here at least for part of that. Mr. Ohm is here. There was a proposal to amend the Deep Creek watershed zoning ordinance to allow a new category called farm wineries. So this would be currently agriculture is permitted in all districts, and you're allowed some value added work on the property if you're selling farm products, but the winery part is kind of a combination of several different uses. It could be looked at as a restaurant or a tavern or a farm use. So we've had discussions, a few of the meetings about how to do that. I believe we've had a little bit of agreement amongst everybody that this is something worth exploring and looking at expanding into the Deep Creek area. But we've not agreed on all the terms. So some of the things I think there was agreement on with this would have to be something big, 20 acres at least. Have to be a property that is assessed agriculture. We've looked at pretty strict setbacks, 75-foot front, 100-foot side and rear, and that this would still require a hearing before the Board of Appeals. I think the sticking point has been timing and production. And I don't want to speak for everybody, I'm just summarizing a little bit. I think where we've struggled a little bit is what constitutes a farm winery and what constitutes just a winery that happens to be occurring on a farm. So part of the question was how much production can actually occur from this farm, and some of that is limited by the growing area and the region we're in. I don't know the exact answer to that, how much, what quantity of grapes can be grown. And the other thing comes down to timing. I think it would take a while to be established. So at the last meeting, there were no consensus on those 2 points. I believe in talking to Mr. Ohm, I think you would at least need a few years to get established, correct? And there would be a limited amount that you would be able to grow there. So for your proposal, I think those would be the core elements. So talking to Mr. Ohm, we realized this was a bigger discussion we were all going to have, but I'm trying to honor his original request as well. So I'll put that out. I know last time we kind of all agreed to think about it some more and see if we had any other ideas about how to do that. So I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts on that. He and I did discuss a little bit, and Debbie Alston and I have discussed there are different types of state licenses. So there's a Category 3 and a Category 4, and they stipulate how much you would actually produce there, whether you have to actually produce anything from the farm, or if you're able to bring product in. So one option would be simply tying this to a state license. Those, I believe, are potentially being amended right now. Debbie gave me a copy of a bill that's in the legislation right now, changing those. So that's one bit of a downside. If we reference those in our Deep Creek ordinance, we have to be careful because those could change. The state can change their liquor laws. Does
I
anybody
have a question for you, sir. If you're talking 2 years to establish, what do you think, what is your growing season? Are you gonna do grapes, apples, orange, what are you gonna, grapes, I assume?
Yep.
Well, your take, knowing Garrett County, what is that growing season in Garrett County?
Well, it's gonna take you at least 3 years before you can get a product that you can actually sell, and most likely it's gonna be 4 years before, when you plant grapes, before that bottle gets sold.
Okay, and that, it's like the growing season, is that like from March to, I don't know, I've got grapes around, but I don't know how long it takes
Oh, yeah,
to
yeah.
get them to maturity, like the.
They're breaking bud right now, and then you harvest typically in like, late August,
Okay.
September, depending on the type of grape.
So then after that, you'd be probably dormant then, right? So whatever, your harvest will be that in August to make your wine for that year or whatever you're making.
Yep.
And you say it's gonna take 3-4 years before you get your first crop, right?
Typically, no, not your first crop, but typically by the time, when you plant a grape, it's gonna be 4 years before you can actually sell a bottle that comes from
Okay.
those grapes.
Alright.
It's just that, it takes a long time because you're gonna let it sit, you're gonna harvest it, and then let it sit and pull on, so forth, so.
Where do you stand, and probably not, I don't know how to word this in a way other than to say it, where do you stand on bringing other product in to start your business?
Yeah, so my idea, to be completely candid, is, I would like to do, so if you have a class 4 winery license through the state, it's pretty restricted, and they passed a law, which I think they passed it in 2018, but they withheld enforcing it actually until today, I believe is the first day. Because 30% of the wineries were gonna go out of business because they stipulated you had to have 51% of Maryland product in what you sell. Well, there was a lot of wineries that didn't have that because there wasn't enough grapes available in Maryland, and it's not the perfect place to grow them. So what they do is they also have a class 3 winery license, and a class 3 winery license allows you to make wine on your farm, but there's much less stipulations, so you can actually buy grapes from somewhere else, from Pennsylvania, you can buy some bulk wine and do that, so it gives you that ability. So recently, there were several wineries that have gone and converted from a class 4 to a class 3 plus a local license, because without when you convert, the class 4 allows you to make it and sell it retail. The class 3 only allows you to make it and give tours and then give it away. So if you have a class 3, you've got to have that ability to sell it retail, right, which where the local license comes into play. So that's the route I would like to go. I would ultimately going to be a class 4, but it's just going to take time to get there, right? You don't know, and you don't know how big the market is, and
Right.
So if you lay out, it's not for the faint of heart to lay out this kind of money and time, and then nobody shows up, or you don't have enough because of the secular nature of the people up here and the amount of people that come up here. So what I said to Chad, I would like to go like some of these other ones have go class 3, so I can actually make sure I can produce enough and have a varied amount of product, and then perhaps.
And that would then finance your grape growing and things like that, I assume.
Yeah, and if you look at what happened, it's very typical of, I hate to say it, but of government, right? The intentions were very good. The intention of that law was to have Maryland farm wineries produce stuff from Maryland, but then the reality is, what does it do? The reality was it pushed people out of business, or they had to change the way they did business because there isn't enough there, right? So, again, the reality is, you want to have a winery, or you want to have something that's only in Maryland? In my opinion, people want a winery. In fact, a good friend of ours who owns a winery in Virginia, we were talking to him recently, and he said, people don't even ask anymore where it's made. They don't even care. The clientele 20 years ago, yes, today, they want to come in and drink wine and have a good time. So, again, my idea would be, what I would like to do is be like one of those others, so I'm a little bit protected, have a class 3 license to make wine, so to have the ability to start making wine. I could open up as soon as like next year probably, and then plant my stuff, and then as time goes by, then I grow the business, and then I slowly and surely have more and more.
Now, this is gonna be another question that the attorney may be able to answer, for me, but if you do have a product that's say I develop a wine, it's called Tony Durr wine. That's specific, you have a patent or whatever on that brand product. You have a certain type of grapage or whatever you're gonna buy to just make that kind of wine, or you make it 4 or 5 different kinds of wine. I guess what I'm saying is, you have your own brand established. So you're just gonna make wine, and it won't be necessarily gonna be, it's not gonna be your brand, it'll be whatever.
Oh, no, it'll be my brand, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be
Okay.
bottled and branded with our.
Okay, so you're branded for your product.
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I know what I'm getting at there, is that if you're gonna put a label in front of it, it can't be
He's
grape
making
juice
it
poured in with vodka,
from his
it's gotta be.
grapes. Yeah, if you're making it from your own grapes.
Yeah, and those labels have to be approved federally before you get the label. Like, there's a whole host of things that have to go with
Okay.
it. Yeah, sure, it would be only our labeled stuff.
And I'm only asking that question because if you're allowed to go outside to get your grapes, to bring the grapes in, I'm sure there's a certain type of grape that you're gonna bring in to match what you're gonna grow at some point, or that's what you attempt to grow.
Mhm.
Or you're gonna, okay. Any
Yeah,
other questions?
because of what the area we're in, this is the worst growing region of Maryland. And certainly you can grow some grapes here, so my plan is really have like an estate wine, which is pretty typical, right? So that we can grow that here, and then other stuff I would have to source from Maryland, and probably some from Virginia, and probably the best of stuff from Pennsylvania.
Anybody have any other questions about this?
Yeah, so when we're talking about having a farm winery, we're really off the lake here.
Just in Deep Creek watershed. That's the only place we're talking about this. Outside the watershed, there would not be any specific category for this, no use
I
restrictions.
understand that, but you're not like doing this on lakefront property because you couldn't afford it anyway, so.
Well, we looked at 20 acres, so what we talked about, and I think the crux of this
20
issue is we would be taking this, if we're looking at the lake as a whole, we've got residential districts where uses like restaurants and taverns, manufacturing are all restricted. So this use is somewhat of an amalgamation of all those different types of uses. It reflects on all those. So I think that is the concern and my concern. We would now be allowing something that is a little bit of those types of uses going into these residential districts. Now, we could restrict it by district, but the way those districts cross across the watersheds, it's kind of hard just to pick one of those because you would have farms in Ag Resource, LR1, LR2, you'd have it everywhere. So we were looking at allowing it any place that had 20 acres with an agricultural assessment, and you would have this. Currently, right now, you could do a catering facility with a special exception in those areas. There are restrictions for that. You have to have a special exception. That's just event-based, so you would just have an event there. You wouldn't be able to be open all the time. Taverns would not be permitted, just straight out restaurants would not be. So I think that was a little bit of our struggle. How do we find that balance where we're not introducing something that's contrary to what's going on in the rest of that district that is mainly residential, but maybe allows a little bit of flexibility with the ag use.
So we're talking about adding a special exception within the zoning, where you can apply for a special exception. And then you gotta meet all these criteria, and that's the criteria you're coming up with.
Yeah, so, typically when you look at a special exception, any criteria that we definitely want to happen, we need to write as requirements. And then the board's position will be, if they take that as a special exception, they can look and see, is there anything specific about this property that would, one, either disqualify it, which is usually unlikely, but it's a possibility. They look at it, is there something really unique about this property that it's not appropriate? Otherwise, they might look at things that would be specific about that property, about concerns of neighbors or effects of traffic or impact to the neighborhood, and then they could put additional setback requirements. So they might require some fencing or quiet hours or things like that the board can do. But you want to give the board a good framework to work with that if there's stuff that we really want to regulate, we put it in black and white as a requirement and not put the onus on the board to do all that.
So we'd come up like with quiet hours or something like that.
You could, or again, some of those things, sometimes if a property is really far away from everybody else, hours maybe are not as important. If it's right next to a lot of other residences, maybe that's a case where even the setbacks are increased or there's landscaping or something like that. So some of those things you can, I think the main regulation provides a framework, and then the board can look at some site-specific things to see if they need beefed up or not.
Okay. I wasn't here for last meeting, so I was just looking for a little bit of extra clarification.
Yeah, and again, I think
go to wineries all the time. I enjoy them. They're not loud and obnoxious. I guess you could have a band or something, but they're nice to visit. I think it'd be a good addition to them.
Yeah, and I think
certain
that
areas, and nobody can afford 20 acres right on the lake. I mean, right, to just put a winery.
yeah, there would not be as
So
many
it's not gonna
properties.
be like you're taking up the most high dollar property right off the lake. So then I'm assuming you're not gonna be in a condensed neighborhood that you're gonna bother.
Yeah, and I think we
Right.
had talked about 75-foot front and 100-foot side and rear
So-
setbacks. And
Okay.
that was the
75
buffer
front
that was
100.
75-foot front, 100-foot side and rear. And again, these were things we all kind of generally agreed to those. The big, I think, sticking point was that production on the farm. what ties this to agriculture, which is permitted, and what steps over more towards those more commercial or industrial type uses of a canning facility or something like that.
And we have to tie it into some ag way to get a special exception in on this? Is that what you're
Well, I
saying?
mean, the ordinance can be amended, so we could simply say we want to allow restaurants in Lake Residential. I don't think that is what anybody wants though. So that's, we can amend the ordinance as we see fit, but I think we need to keep the general direction of those districts need to be kept in mind, which Lake Residential, ag resource, rural resource, Lake Residential 2, those are all things that by definition are more residential type districts, where most commercial uses are prohibited or heavily restricted.
So we're looking for a special exception under Lake Residential.
I think we would allow it all through the watershed because
okay.
the acreage is going to limit it. It's generally going to just be in bigger properties.
Okay.
But those may be sprinkled throughout the watershed, so I don't know that we want to restrict it in that
Now,
way.
without looking at the zoning ordinance, do we have anything that in our ordinance that discusses the wedding venues?
So we have commercial catering facility and banquet facility, and that is you could do that
That's
with
what
a
I
special
thought. I couldn't
exception.
remember how it was worded.
Those are very much event-based though, so they're not open to the general public like you would a restaurant or something like that. It would be, you're scheduling somebody's wedding and you have it there, you schedule a family reunion or something there, so they're not just open to the
Do
general.
we have any restrictions on where that's located, any setbacks or anything? But I guess I'm looking at it from the gentleman's perspective that in a lot of ways it's a special event because you're only gonna have wine and you're gonna be, I don't know what your hours will be. They're about to be restricted, I would guess, some way, but, I guess I look at it like trying to find a way to make it work in the watershed would be view it in a sense that, because I heard you say about catering, you could cater an event there.
Yeah, you could. So there are a couple of those. Brodax is one that has that
Right.
special exception. The Red Barn down off North Glade,
Right.
former North Glade Inn. Those
I
both
know
have
when we
that.
did the one at when we did the one at the West, the wedding venue there, and I know we had to go through,
That's a little different because that falls under their whole
Right,
commercial,
right.
commercial resort. But the other two I mentioned have a special exception. So we have to be careful with them. They couldn't just say, we're open for happy hour every day at 5 o'clock. We're like, well, that's not an event. You are a catering facility or an event that holds events. That's in the definition of it.
That's what I think the definition has to be pretty detailed in a sense, so that you have a guideline to go, okay, for your operations of selling wine is from 12 o'clock to 9 o'clock or whatever.
Well, I mean, I think that the Liquor Control Board largely controls that already, but to me, there's so few properties in the watershed with 20 acres that could actually do it, that it's so limited. I'm sure, and setbacks on top of it, I don't have any issue with this. I'm not sure how you could, require a certain growing period or production of a certain amount of locally grown grapes to be used for wine, because it's just, to me, not a realistic thing. So I would, honestly, if it were me, in my opinion, you just tie it to that state license and requirement.
That was gonna be our next question, the state will license this, right, the Garrett County won't.
Well, that 20 acres, can we just say, no matter what, you have to have like at least an acre of your own grapes? Whether
Yeah.
it produces
Yeah.
a percentage, just say an acre. It's gotta look like you're just trying to
Right.
do one.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that was something.
And that's what a lot of other counties have done. Most of them will say you have to have 2 acres of grapes, within like 2 years is very typical.
What's reasonable?
Producer.
I don't know, I don't produce one.
Well, I think that's reasonable because again, from going through this, you're not gonna find somebody going down this road and doing that if they don't have an intention of doing it. It's way too much time and money and everything else, so, because you're trying to keep from bad actors, right, that's one of the
Mhm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
So, like with my property, no one's even gonna see it, you're gonna know that it's there, turn off and go back, way back into the place, but, yeah, that's what's kind of typical, is they'll say, yeah, you should plant 2 acres, that's very common in some other counties in Maryland and in Virginia.
Is that too much to ask? 2 acres?
No, I don't think so, no, I don't think so at all.
I mean, it's gotta be bigger in the spring, you know, you can just say, I got a grape orchard.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
I think there's no doubt in mind, we can come up with a way to set back and stuff that would make the people, I guess my concern is, you get into, I don't wanna say, you get into what, I think with Debbie last time was here, said about manufacturing. How do you police the manufacturer if you start, you know, I don't know, that's something that,
Well, I mean, I'm sure those state licenses have their restrictions
I mean,
on
I don't know what the
them,
state
you know.
license is, I don't.
The state is what, handles the manufacturing, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's acceptable by the county, but sometimes, you know, I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't be, but I don't wanna speak for the county, you know, health department, that kind of stuff.
Mr. Chairman, I think that, is it unreasonable, I like tying to the state regulations, I think why reinvent the wheel? But, does that require that it be limited to product produced on the property? To me, that's more important than where the grapes come from, is that it's, you know, that we're just not licensing somebody to just be a reseller. If his intent is to have a winery, he's gonna grow the grapes, he's gonna have this 2 acres or whatever the state says, but do we care that the sale is limited to product produced on the property and not a resale type thing?
I think if I heard you right, the state would police if you got what type was it, 3, what, the 3 and 4?
There's, 2 licenses, 3 and 4. Yeah.
3 says you can bring the grapes in, right? Maryland
Yep.
says that's okay. Now, that's where I think we gotta figure out if we're gonna accept him bringing grapes in or whatever product.
And the class 4 license one allows you to make wine anywhere within the state of Maryland too, by the way, like, which is very typical. So a lot of wineries, especially when they start out, because they may not want to invest in millions of dollars for equipment, they will do some part of it somewhere else. So in Maryland, there's facilities where they will actually, you buy the grapes, you can supervise, and they'll actually have the equipment to actually ferment it and make the wine there, and then deliver it to you. And you can do all different parts of it as well, right? I mean, you can ferment it yourself, let them produce it, you can have somebody else bottle it. So there's all that out there, because I think the state realizes that if you ask somebody to go open up a winery and do it all themselves, buy property, build all that, you're talking, probably nobody's gonna do it, unless you've just got, tens of millions laying around, not knowing what your customer base is gonna be, right? It's just not a smart business decision. You're way too limited, and then you look at what the state did to people, even on top of that, with the change in the requirements at the class 4 winery license, they were gonna put 30% of them out of business. So, again, that's why I wanna be a class 3 initially, at least, because I don't wanna be forced out of business by the state once I spend all this money. That's just ridiculous, right?
I mean, I think what you're at, you feel confident with the state policing that instead of us, that's what I
I
think.
mean, I certainly don't want to police it,
I mean,
for the
right.
state to police it, I, not knowing what the state regulation is, I mean, we hear some testimony here, what we think it is. I don't know, I'm asking what's important to us. I mean, we don't, just speaking for the zoning ordinance, we're not trying to attract wineries we don't need the wineries in the zoning ordinance. They're coming, somebody has come to us and say, we want to do it here, can we do it? I don't know what our appetite is for it, how much, I mean, the 20-acre thing to me, I'm with Liz, that limits it to a bunch. I mean, that probably puts it down to a handful of properties, period. Maybe that's enough. I'm not sure what the definition of it is. If, I wasn't aware of what he was saying, so he's saying that, I think, if I understand you right, sir, you're saying that you could have it, the state will allow you in this situation to sell wine that was made off-site, but made, as long as it was made in Maryland? Is that what you're
Yes.
saying? So I had never thought about that. Maybe that's okay. I'm just asking a question.
And that's why I asked the question about whether he was branded or not, because he's not gonna put it, if he puts his sticker on it, that means that he's paying somebody to make his brand in, say, Allegheny County or Washington County. He brings it up here to sell it, it's still his brand, and he branded that. So what he's selling us is what he established, what his mix is. So if it's 1 part black grape, whatever it is, that's what his mix is. So if he's paying somebody or whatever, in, like I said, Hagerstown or wherever, to make your product till you get yourself established with grape, and that's what I think, But you did say it had to be raised in Maryland, or could you go outside of Maryland to buy this product?
So on a class 3, you can do both.
Okay.
You can actually get, like, you want to have somebody make it in Maryland, they can actually get grapes from out of state, because the state realizes that there typically isn't enough product. But it's
Right.
not like, Virginia where it's so well established with so much grape vineyards that it's available. So that's the distinction.
And I guess my question then comes back to you, Bruce, how are we gonna try to set standards for its manufacturing and its production, or are we just gonna try to set standards for its facilities within the water, you know what I'm saying? Use a 20-acre threshold plus setback plus whatever. We're gonna try to step outside that realm and try to say, okay, well, you gotta buy your grapes in the state of Maryland, you gotta be manufactured, but I think the state's already dictating that to a certain point.
Yeah, I think Chad, we were talking one time, you brought up a good analogy, and that was, if I wanna have set up a farm market, I can do that, anybody can that has agriculture, and I can sell corn, and you have no idea where that corn came from, it doesn't say it has to come from my farm either.
Right.
Well, I'll just share, from the ordinance, this might be helpful. So this is the definition of agriculture, and part of that said, and this agriculture is permitted throughout the watershed. He talks about, includes value-added processing, the processing of an agricultural product in order to increase its market value, and that includes fermenting. The other part of this, though, if we look in the other part of the ordinance and we get into these manufacturing and industrial uses, so the agriculture is permitted everywhere. But if we get into commercial processing, and that talks about bakeries, bottling of milk, it doesn't particularly mention wine, but I think all these things, if you look at that, that's a big no in all these areas. So I think that's where we're trying to find, this is lying in between those two uses somewhere, because if all this product were on your farm, I don't think we'd have a problem. I think, we'd all say that's clearly, you're taking that product, it's totally on the farm. The question, I would say it's the same as if it were corn. If it was all just your corn and things on the property, that's one thing. If you're importing truckloads of corn and canning it there, I would say, well, that's more of this manufacturing and industrial type use. So, to me, that's, as I look at the ordinance, that's where we're saying, can we find a middle ground here where we're still kind of honoring the general intent of agriculture and not slipping this totally into this more industrial type use where you have a wine factory there. And we keep in mind too that just a pure tavern, a pure restaurant is also not permitted in all these areas, in like residential and ag resource and things. So I think that's where we're trying to find that middle ground between all these uses.
So maybe we need to know and understand what a class 3 and class 4 license is. Maybe that'll help us understand what we're doing. I think that at our level, we're establishing the setbacks and all, and that's fine. But when we start talking about that, maybe we need to know what the state says, and maybe it's all written out there for us.
I mentioned it to Debbie Alston, who does liquor control, and she gave me this copy of a House bill, so it's potentially being amended right now. So we may not have a super clear answer, but some of the things, this was with the class 4 license, they were amending some things, but it said they shall own, a license holder shall own or have under contract at least 20 acres of Maryland-grown agricultural products in cultivation for use in the production of wine. It looks like they were changing that earlier, it said grapes. So apparently this is going back and forth, so I may not be able to give you the exact verbiage yet, but we can get that, and maybe I can even have Debbie explain that a little bit at the next meeting. Are you thinking that you would want to at some point convert from the class 3 to the class 4 license?
I think it's absolutely doable, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It does concern me because again, the state can change and you're 5 years into a business and, you spend all your money and they change the regulations because of stupidity at the state level. That's a little bit hard to swallow, right? I mean, which is again, why some of these businesses had to go to that class 3. So, I mean, I'd be open to it, but I probably would ultimately rather not, if you ask me what I would do, because that way it gives me, because again, I have less risk in a business, so.
So how do we want to proceed with this, Chad? You want to try to come up with
Well, I guess
until we know, I'm like Bruce, I think we need to have something from the state that says this and this and this. I'm kind of like Liz when I don't think there's a problem with the application of a winery. I think it's just figuring out where the stop and start point is, Like, and Bruce, like you said, 20-acre parcel of land are pretty slim in Deep Creek, so you're not gonna have 15 of them pop up, or 20, So I don't know, I guess,
if everybody is comfortable with this potentially being tied to a state license. I could get details of that for the next meeting, put these other things in more, a little more specific language and see if that's something everybody at that point feels like, yes, this is something we're more comfortable with.
Is that
We need to know that, right? We need to
Yeah.
make-
yeah, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I
Do we
agree.
need to make a motion to push this process forward or not, or is it just move on?
You can, if you want to make a motion to say
I
that you
think
would like.
everybody's on board with doing something here,
Mhm.
unless,
Do we need anything like that to give you the okay?
You
Jeff?
can, I mean, yeah, you can make a motion if you want, and Tell me to do
Move
it.
forward on, right.
that I will prepare, basically, so what I'm hearing is, we would say special exception in all districts, 20 acres minimum, lot area, 75-foot front setback, 100-foot side and rear setback. We'll come up with a definition. It will be on agriculturally assessed land. Two of the other things, looking at my notes, they would be able to serve food in conjunction with it and have some retail. I think that's something else. Do we want to limit the size of that? Limit the size of the retail area and limit the,
We're probably better let you put this in a little better form and then vote on it.
okay.
You take that wide, you want the, I mean,
I mean, is that in the, I guess we'll know once you move forward on getting more information for us, whether or not the state license actually has the limitations in it for the amount of retail.
Mhm. Yeah, I can double check on that, and I'll make sure,
yeah, that's a start.
The class 4 winery license actually lists the actual foods you can serve. It's that specific, which to me is insane, but it is. The class 3 has no restriction because it doesn't speak to that, right? So that's the only trick probably that you're gonna have, and I don't know what the other counties did with these wineries converted to a class 3 with a retail license to sell, because some of that, again, food and whatnot, the hours that you can operate are all built into the class 4 winery. So I don't know, you may have to take some language and say, hey, you know, you need to follow the class 4 winery licenses, you know, per food, you know, something available or whatever.
yeah, I mean, if we tie it to a class 3 state license, we could also pick and choose if there are things in the class 4 that we do like.
Yeah.
I would just say, we wanna, you know, from a regulatory standpoint, it's always good to have clear regulations. You know, I don't think we wanna be there where we have to sample your menu every week and make sure you didn't sell crackers when you're only supposed to sell cheese or something like that. That gets hard. I'd like things to be very black and white from the beginning. So we just want to keep that in mind. Anything we do should be stuff that's very obvious, and we don't want to have a situation where 5 years down the road we're coming to you and say, hey, you're not quite complying with your menu restrictions or something like that. That's hard to regulate. So.
Yeah, 2 more questions. Is there anybody else besides yourself that's interested in like right now? Okay, and then the next question is, government moves slow, as you know, so what's the urgency? Is there an urgency to move this along as quickly as possible? or-
I mean, I'd like to do it, you know, I was ready 6 months ago, but, I am waiting, certainly, yeah.
And I think in talking to you, I think we felt this was kind of a big issue, allowing this in, so we took a little more time than a typical amendment to change a setback from 10 to 15 feet. We might just brought it in and voted yes or no. I think this was a bigger thing that we wanted to discuss, because it also impacts, I think, the next question, that are breweries and distilleries too. So I wanted to make sure we were looking at it in a big look at the whole watershed, not just on this
This
specific.
doesn't stop him from starting his vineyard, right?
Yeah.
And to be clear,
There's
setbacks
nothing to
are
stop
for any
that.
buildings or anything like that, not just growing areas or.
Yeah, the
say
agricultural.
structures or stuff, things like that.
Yeah, I think the idea would be if you have residences nearby, you're going to limit the meeting place, the tasting room, the facilities where you might be bottling things.
any other questions on this? Are you okay with Albert moving forward? I mean, I know you're probably more of a
Oh,
hurry.
I'm fine, yeah. I mean, I had a feeling it was gonna be a process, it's okay.
Right.
Yeah, this is a different process where we're on one hand talking about something that's very big picture, but I'm trying to keep your original proposal in mind too, that we don't get to the point that we approve something that wasn't what, I think we owe you a yes or no on what you're asking for, so, yeah, I'm trying to balance those
I
two
agree.
things.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm trying to do what
right, trying to do what's right, right.
300 wineries are in Virginia and everyone in Maryland, right, we're trying to do the same thing, that's
So
not a
would-
big deal.
Would you plant grapes now, or do you have to wait till
No,
next
because
season now?
if
So
you
it's
guys
too
don't let
late.
me do it, then I spend all that money,
Alright.
and there's not a good enough market for the grapes, unfortunately.
So I'll put some of this in a little, in a different format that everybody can see, and at the next meeting, we'll plan on getting some clarity between the Class 3 and Class 4 license. Again, I'm not sure if we'll be able to do that at the next meeting, if this Class 4 is still in the hands of the state where it's being amended potentially, but we can at least look at that, see if we're comfortable with Class 3 license requirements, and if there's anything from the Class 4, just that language that we think is good to add, some extra stipulations, we can do that.
Just to be clear, the desired license is the 3 or the 4?
3,
The 3 is the desire. How many classes, is there 4 total classes?
2 licenses.
Just 2?
2.
3 or 4, no 1 and 2.
No, there is a 1 and 2, but I don't know what they are.
Is the Deep Creek, zoning board, are they aware of this, what we're doing here?
No, so the Deep Creek, the zoning board of
Because I could take them
appeals,
a couple meetings, so you're,
well, this would go to the commissioners next. So the zoning board doesn't vote on this type of stuff. They would vote on it when it comes through for variances or special exceptions. That's their role in it. They're not
Oh,
necessarily,
okay.
yeah, they don't necessarily have a vote or a
Right,
role.
no
We try to
rules,
keep them informed, but they're not involved in this part of the process.
okay.
Amendments go to the planning commission, you make a recommendation, and then it goes to the county commissioners for final approval. So once,
Got learned.
yeah.
I mean, for me, I don't wanna rush it through certainly, but, I mean, we've been months working on this, I don't wanna be talking about the same thing in August, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we get maybe next meeting we can just finish it up and take it from there, how's that sound? Any other discussion on this? Thank you for your time, you really helped explain it a lot better, I appreciate that.
No problem, thank you, I appreciate it.
I didn't catch your name.
Mike?
Mike?
Oh,
Okay, what do we have left? Officers?
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, you guys have a safe day.
Yeah, you too.
All right, I guess we have to,
Thanks, Jack.
Yep.
elect new officers for the, 2024, 25, whatever year. First will be for chairman, take nomination.
Maybe nominate.
Okay. Me, Tony, no, nominate Tony Dirt. Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, vice chair,
I maybe nominate Liz.
Liz, any objections? Anybody else? All in favor? Aye, unanimous. What we have left, treasurer? No,
Secretary.
Secretary. Are you secretary now?
Currently, yeah.
Tough job.
Let's take nomination for secretary. I nominate Tim.
No,
Y'all need-
I second it.
Just nominate somebody, Tim, very good. Jeff, are you secretary?
I am right now.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So moved, Chad.
Okay.
Thank you for participating. Is that it?
I think that's it.
Meeting adjourned.
Yep.
I need
Thanks,
to sign
everybody.
some papers.
Yep.
So, happy hour is on, and every day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thought happy hour was an event every day.
Hey, Jim,
Confused.
sorry you missed lunch, we solved all
You
the
have to
problems.
pre-schedule it.